family looks different for everyone. There are so many reasons why people cannot biologically produce a child. If that is the case for yourself, you should know all the options available for you today. Thanks to assisted reproductive technology, I was able to create my own family because genetically, I am challenged. I kept hearing too many people say that intended parents don't talk about this. We do. I do. So I wanted to talk about my experience and normalize women of color struggling with this too. Culturally, the science could be challenging for several reasons for people to understand. Some people will never change their beliefs on how strange this feels to them, regardless of the facts. Some beliefs in life, including that of my own culture, think this issue should lay in God's hands only. We're taught for years to do all we can to not get pregnant. When I was ready to, my body was not. We know now that it is not a given that everyone, male or female, can produce a biological child. For women going through IVF, it can take a few tries. It doesn't just get taken care of in one take, and it does take physical preparation. Same goes for freezing eggs or embryos. It might take more than one round, especially the older you get when you don't have as many eggs. When I was trying to freeze embryos, my doctor wanted fresh eggs, and so back I went for another round. There are more options available today to go about creating a family that were not when I started my journey. Even as new as in this month of February, our president signed an executive order supporting IVF to be considered by all states to being covered by medical insurance and potentially somewhat covered by our government. It still remains to be seen how it all unfolds, but it was a positive move on his part, I must say. Let's just see how it plays out. It does give hope to those who struggle with these payments of IVF that can be as high as $25,000 a month sometimes. I personally could not have stayed on this road less traveled on if it wasn't for the support around me of my family and friends. I didn't then know about the community that exists for those of us affected by different types of infertility. I'd like to share with you through this podcast this information, the facts, my process, and hope that it's helpful. You're listening to Mothers in Arms. I'm your host, Leslie Lopez, and this is episode number 7, Unearthed. The story of how my daughter came to be is a little untraditional. I wanted to circle back to what led me to decide to go on that journey by myself. I'm not trying to portray that it was an easy decision to make. I walked away from a lot that I loved and was important to me due to the curveball that came at me. It was hard to talk about back then because the wounds were so fresh, yet my daughter being on the way was a blessing I'd been waiting for. Not to mention it was COVID and it was tumultuous times for me, but I made it happen. I persevered and my daughter is thriving. Doing it alone required setting up the right infrastructure in my life that supported me and my little one. Would I have preferred to have done this with a loving partner? 100%. But life gave me lemons, so lemonade I made. Let's get into it. I went straight into a couple more rounds of IVF. I wanted to have this child, so I went ahead and just kept pushing forward. Unfortunately, the embryos weren't taking. I didn't understand what was going on. I was getting great numbers with my egg retrievals, but when we went to fertilize them, none of them were taking. That's when we found out that, oh, hey, let's test Roger's sperm. And that's when we found out that unfortunately, because he's a cancer survivor, those were sort of his last soldiers. I wasn't going to be able to get pregnant naturally or by him anymore. That was no longer an option. And that's when we decided to press the big pause. Let's just stop here. Although I did do another round of IVF. I just wanted to have some eggs. So I just needed some insurance. I think I was on autopilot. I just went back in for one more. And I was just so ashamed that I couldn't do it. I was embarrassed. I put up walls. I found nurturing in other aspects of my life. Latin women, it's such a cliche, but we're supposed to be baby breeders. It's the generalization that we are fertile myrtles, and that was not my case. Even though I had a big family, I came from a lot of siblings. My mother was one of 11 children, my father is one of 9. Like, what's going on here? But it also made sense because my sister, my eldest sister, also has fertility issues, and 3 of my aunts on my mother's side also never had children because of fertility issues. So I had, okay, genetics, your biology, you're not alone, but I didn't have any friends who were talking about this to me. So I did feel alone. And even my aunts and my sister weren't really talking about it, coming from a Catholic background. We don't really talk about sex and, anything to do with the birds and the bees and why we couldn't get pregnant. So I didn't have this sort of inner security network, an inner safe place of people that I could really hash this out with. Also, at the time, we just weren't into the idea of assisted reproductive technology. It just wasn't in, we didn't know about this. IVF was as far as we were willing to go. But the idea of me purchasing sperm, hiring a surrogate, it wasn't in our field. It wasn't around us. We didn't know anyone who was using those methods just yet. But I found myself cringing or getting nervous every time something about kids came up, children's parties, baby showers. And they made me uncomfortable. Even when my stepdaughter got pregnant, I threw her a baby shower. I expected us to bond from it. I thought it would make me happy. I thought it would fulfill a box that, would help us have a better relationship. Our relationship was complicated. She's 10 years younger than I am. So um, the baby shower didn't exactly bring us closer, but it did shine a light on how much I wanted to be a mother. I just didn't want to push the issue right then. She was pregnant. I didn't want to. Another reason why I didn't think that I could become a mother, I approve of me being with her dad because of the age and class difference. There was a lot of differences. She grew up in Beverly Hills. I grew up in East Los Angeles. I can say now that I'm a mom, I could have been a better stepmom to Claire. I see now our differences and I respect them. And I see how I could have navigated that unique relationship in a different way, leading with empathy and nurturing of the heart instead of just socially. I I see our human nature and I didn't then. Although I celebrated her children and her being a mom, it also made me yearn for my own family. Having step grandchildren left me with a void inside, and it caused friction that we didn't discuss. Sometimes I'd come across a dress I'd worn when I was pregnant or a picture of me during that time, and I just stopped dead in my tracks or feel this lump in my throat. And I'd go back to my OBGYN office and I'd see all those pictures of the babies up on the walls. I'd feel that rock in my gut. Roger and I had agreed from the get go that we didn't want to spend years trying to make our family. I knew that was his wish, and I agreed with him, not wanting to rock that boat, not wanting to ask for more special needs. I felt like I should just accept being child free and focus on my husband, his career, his retirement dream, our travels, our charities. I remember him saying that he was scared that if I had the baby, it would take away my focus from him. I just didn't really allow myself to visualize what I really wanted, my voice. I just couldn't say it, even though I was vocal about everything else I wanted. This was hard for me. Maybe it's the way I was raised. I was raised to be humble, let others first, and I definitely put others' needs before mine. I was not encouraged to rethink this decision that I was living, and I just moved forward that way. I was trying to appease and not upset. I didn't want to feed into the cliche that I had married Roger for him to be my baby daddy. I just didn't want to drag us into turbulent waters and this complicated next chapter of our life. But when my second grandchild arrived, I just couldn't hide it anymore. I spoke to my husband. It was a curveball conversation. It took a couple days. It wasn't a one shot deal, but I remember he looked at me and knew it was what I wanted. We started the process of looking for donor sperm. It was important for me to try and find a donor that resembled my husband. What did he look like when he was younger? The age of the candidates who are donating, from thousands of applicants. The minute I put when you put in Jewish ancestry, it went down to 80. And when I put in height, hair, it went down to fewer. So we didn't have a lot of options, but I do remember enjoying the process. I had never been online dating. I figured this is probably something similar to what that was, of just going through the applicants and trying to find my match. A little awkward when you're doing it with your husband. So I definitely had moments. I would do it on my own, and then I'd come back to him. And so we did it together, looking at what did they sound like? What were they saying? Who's responsible? Who is mature? What did their families look like? What are their families' biological backgrounds? My top three choices ended up being the agency's top three. And we met in person and we went through it a little bit more. And then my number one, my secret number one, ended up being their number one. And so I say my secret number one because the minute I heard his voice, I just heard this like sexy guy. And I was like, okay, who's that? I remember just making a star on that note. And yeah, that's who we ended up going with. He had limited vials as well. So we bought them up, and a little bit of insurance. I was able to take a breath. I remember being just a little inching closer to the dream. I loved the Jewish community and how much they embraced me. I didn't always feel this warmth in my Catholic community. I was wanting to create a family with my husband. So I just wanted to be closer to him. So once we created the embryo, I had to find a surrogate. And we started vetting agencies, and we chose one that had been around in California from the get go. One that was had been recommended. So we started the process of the interviews, and I remember asking if there would be the option of a Latina surrogate for me. I was really trying to see myself in this process as much as possible. There weren't that many at the time, and they said, if you want to wait, we can certainly put that. That might push you back a little bit, but we'll make a note. There weren't that many at the time with this agency. So I let that go for me. I guess, okay, that's fine. It's important that they're healthy. That was the most important thing for me. I started learning about these angels, these women who put their lives on the line in order to help others. I saw how much love there was already in their lives with their children. It gave me hope. At one point, we did hear from a surrogate in Colorado, and I didn't want to have an out of state surrogate. I felt it was important to wait for California, so we waited a little bit more. All in all, I think we waited about 8.5 months when Melissa and Brian chose us. When you go through to an agency, you have to create a profile of yourself, talk about why you want to go down this journey, put some pictures up of what you look like. So they chose us. We didn't choose them. Shortly after we heard about Melissa and Brian choosing us, shock hit the fan in my marriage. And just as we were moving out of our home that August 2019, I couldn't look at my husband the same way again. I found out I had been taken advantage of, and I didn't have the luxury of time to process and pause. I just saw a liar. The person I loved had been deceitful to me. I was outraged, but I knew that if I passed on Melissa and Brian in that moment, as I was told by the agency, they would be allowed to move on to find another couple to help. I didn't want to wait. I wanted to deal with what happened with my marriage, but I also didn't want to wait. It was a very confusing time. Roger offered to sign the agency papers with me and push forward. We even went to some counseling, but he just didn't want to talk about the nitty-gritty of what had happened. And it was something at the time that I really needed to hear. He was remorseful, but he just wanted to push everything under the rug. I didn't hear him say what I was needing to hear, like, "Don't go, Leslie. Don't do this to us. Be patient with me. I'll get there. Maybe I can't talk about it now, but if that's something you need, I will get there." Maybe he would have said it in time, maybe not. I don't know. I just couldn't look at myself in the mirror and know that I had used this bad news to propel my needs forward in order to have my family. It's not right. I felt like him not stopping me from leaving was him not fighting for the family we were trying to create. And he would ask me every day, "What are you going to do? What are you going to do? What did you decide?" And it just I felt pressured. Could I just look the other way in order to get what I wanted? The pressure of what felt constant. It was 4 weeks, actually. When I look back on it, it was only 4 weeks that I had to make the decision to sign the contract by myself as an intended parent. I never shared the details of what happened with anyone. So that added a little bit more confusion as to why I left. My parents are very Catholic, and the Pope doesn't believe in surrogacy. He thinks it's devil's work. So I feel very blessed that my parents were supportive and were able to navigate, what their religion was saying and what I was saying. I don't think they really enjoyed explaining it to other people, their family and their friends, what had happened. They didn't really explain. They kept it short. And later, I remember when we were I'll fast forward to a 3D ultrasound that we were in the middle of during COVID. I remember seeing my mom's face when she saw the fetus up on the screen. And I could see her smile, and I could see her say to my father, "Oh, she has your nose. Oh, I see your mouth." You are not alone in the quest to becoming a parent, if that is what you want for yourself. My hope is that young people can pay attention to their body's reproductive side early on. Maybe you keep a journal of your menstrual symptoms, keep a record of the type of birth control that you're on and how long you've been on it. You can be checked by doctors for inconsistencies such as cysts, fibroids, low sperm count. It's in your best interest to catch this earlier than later. You're born with all the eggs you'll ever have. I personally had to overcome self-shaming of not being able to physically carry a child. Some of it was cultural and some of it was social, but it was all driven by me. When I was not able to capture any more viable eggs, it broke my heart. My future felt bleak. As I found a community of people going through similar circumstances, I was able to find solace in similar stories and navigate my emotions in a healthier way. Being supported when you feel like a physical oddball is such a game changer. That is my hope, that my untraditional path to becoming a parent can help with navigating yours. That wraps us up for today. Thanks for listening. Hope you'll tune in next time. Thank you to Dante Pascuso for your original music. Thank you to Alan and Melissa at Pretty Easy Podcast for co-producing this episode with me. You can find more of these and similar stories on Instagram and TikTok at mothersinarms.pod.